Hi everyone, I'm Lila Cody, video editor and podcast editor for The Courant, and I'm so excited to be your host for this Courant podcast, The Application Blueprint. I'm here with Senior Olivia Carafano, who's editor-in-chief for The Courant, and counselors Erica Shadler and Julia Rossini. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm super excited.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Today, Olivia and I are going to be asking a few questions that many seniors had or still have about the college admissions process. To begin, as you obviously know, seniors are in the midst of college applications and deadlines since November is coming soon and today is October 15th. A lot of people had questions about their college list, ranging from how many schools to apply to, how to know if you have enough safety options, and how to know if you have a solid list based not only on academics but social scene. Do either of you mind talking about the college list and what it should look like?
Yeah, so I think in terms of creating a list, you really want to focus on the overall balance of that list rather than the final number. So I usually say as long as you have somewhere around 10-ish schools, that's a good kind of baseline for your overall list. But again, more importantly than that overall number is the balance within your list. So my rule of thumb is for every single reach school that you add to your list, you want to also add at least one target and at least one likely school so that you know you have just a really holistic balance. When you start to get those decisions back, you're hopefully kind of padding that so that, again, you're getting some positive decisions. You have your targets, which we always say could, kind of go either way. And then you have your reach schools, which are reaches for a reason, right? Those usually mean you're a little bit below, the average accepted data point, but it still feels worth it to sort of throw in the application.
Absolutely, and checking those scattergrams and Naviance is a great tool to figure out if it's a likely match or a reach school, and having several of each is so important. And we always say, even for your likelies, make sure it's a school you would be really happy going to. So all the schools on your list, you should see yourself there, feel like you'd want to go there, and again, just the balance of all three. And as far as the social scene, nothing beats campus visits. So you'll get a sense of flyers that are up, different clubs that they have. You'll see the students interacting with each other. So nothing can really beat that experience. I know a lot of times students will check social media too, and there's lots of information out there. There's books to read about campus culture, but having feet on the campus is the best way to get a sense of the school.
Definitely. Would either of you say a max, you wouldn't recommend students applying to more than a certain amount of schools?
Good question.
Oh, for sure. So Common App will cut you off, I think, at 20, right? But wow. I honestly think 20 schools is way too high. You want to keep in mind that for most schools, not every, but most, you have to complete that main application, usually Common App, but also colleges do have school-specific supplements. So I would say in a perfect world, 10 to 12, 15 schools at the absolute most. Not every student, follows that advice, and we do have many students who, will go above that, 10 to 12. But remember, you're kind of making a lot of work for yourself. If you're applying to, 15, 20 schools, then one, that's a ton of work, and two, have you really done the appropriate amount of research, and are all 20 potentially schools genuinely good fits for you? To me, that seems a little bit unlikely. So usually, in my experience, when students are applying to, more than those 10, 12 schools, it's really because they haven't found a place that is really a great fit. So they're just sort of throwing things on the list just to say they did.
Yeah, that would be a lot to do. 20.
Yeah.
Cannot imagine.
Yeah, that must be crazy. So, once students decide where they want to apply and what schools pique their interest, the real work now begins because you know what you're doing. Another popular question was the different types of applications, early decision versus early action and regular decision. So, what would you recommend for students depending on their interests and where they sit in the application process? And is there an important difference between applying directly on the school's website and using Common App as another platform, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, so for early action and early decision, those are both obviously going to be the earliest ones. So you've got your October 15th ones, your November 1st ones, sometimes some November 15th. But the big distinction between early action and early decision is that early decision is a binding agreement. If you get in, you are committing to attending at that institution. So you could have, 5 or 6 early action schools, but you only get one early decision school. The student should have visited the campus, should have researched the program, and done a really deep dive into the school and kind of think about some of those other top schools. Well, what if I get in there, but I got into my early decision school? Will I regret that I can't go to the other one? So really just have those thoughts, talk with your parents, and you need to also ensure that that it's a financially reasonable choice for you. So again, talking with your parents about that, because you're locked in if it's early decision. And then, so those are both in the fall, and then regular decision applications would be in the winter, generally January, early February. And then there's also rolling admissions, which is all throughout the year, and you usually find out about 6 weeks after you apply for rolling admissions deadlines. And I'm just trying to look at the second part of that question. So as far as using the school-specific application or the Common App. So whenever possible, we encourage you to use the Common App. Most schools will take it. So there's also some schools like schools in the UK or California, the UC schools, Georgetown. Some of them will not take the Common App, so you have to fill out that other application. So when you can, use the Common App, and when you can't, you can do the more specific application.
Do you think it's valuable to do an early decision school? Like, what would you say? Like, would you recommend it to most students, or?
So I wouldn't recommend it to most students because it really has to be your top choice. You're 100% sure that that's where you want to go if accepted, even if you're accepted to the other EA schools. But if you are sure and if your parents are on board with it, yes, we can afford this. So early decision does boost your chances of acceptance, whereas early action may a little, but in general, you'll just either find out earlier or you'll just get deferred to the regular applicant pool and find out when everybody else does. So in specific cases, early decision can be a strategic move to boost your chances of acceptance.
And to just kind of piggyback on that, I think a lot of times, I know in my senior appointments, students will ask, like, I want to be strategic and use my ED, to give myself the best chance at maybe a reach school that I don't think, they think they might not otherwise get into. And I really always try to discourage students from doing that. I know it's hard to not use early decision as a strategic application type, but to your point, you really should only be EDing to a school if that program is your top choice. They have your perfect major, you've already reviewed, all the finances with, family, parents, whatever it may be. And while there are certainly admissions benefits, to going early decision, the difference isn't that huge where you should be, entering into a binding agreement, a binding contract with a school that isn't your top choice just because you think that's the best way to get in.
Great, thank you so much. Getting into real pieces of the application and students' personal essays, are there any essay topics you're tired of seeing and would warn students to either stay away from or take a different route if they do really want to follow that topic? And what do you think admission officers typically look for in a college essay?
Yeah, so I've actually been an admissions reader before as well as being a high school counselor, so I have read a lot of essays in my day. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that there's any, one or any specific topic that students should avoid, there certainly are very popular and sort of cliche topics, right? I have read about the time that the student won the, championship game with all of their friends 600 times. I have read about the broken ankle. I have read about the horrible injury at the end of the championship game, right? There definitely are those very, very, very common essay topics. And I generally say avoid that if you can. But at the same time, what's so important and I think special about the personal essay is it's really the one piece of that application that allows the student to show the admissions reader a piece of your personality. So whatever your topic is, it needs to feel really authentic to you. It should be something that you're really excited to share with admissions, and hopefully it's something different than the information that they can already get from other places in your application. So if you play soccer, I know that based on your activity sheet. If you're a soccer captain, I know that based on your activity sheet. I don't necessarily need to read that as a part of your personal essay to know that about you, right? But what I may not know is that you've been obsessed with ice cream since the time you were 4, and it was your lifelong goal to, work in an ice cream store, and then you had an existential crisis when that didn't work out, or, just anything that's very personal and authentic to you.
I agree with that. You want to evoke emotion in the person that reads it. You want to capture their attention. You want to show your writing abilities, and you want to avoid repeating anything in your activities list or making it sound listy or like a resume. I come across that pretty often, and then I'll say, let's pick one of these things and really expand on it, bring some imagery into it, really bring the person there with you. And it should always be about your personal growth. It shouldn't be about my grandmother or this teacher that really brought a lot out of me. It's got to be about you.
Yeah, and I know that in some rep visits, they usually tend to say, we don't want to hear another injury essay. They tell you straight up, which is kind of good.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the middle of the application process, things, there's always something that you think that you could do better or something that you need to add more.
I've also heard missions trips, church missions trips that can be a little overused.
Yeah. There are always those things, those lists of things.
Something that I like to recommend for my students if they're struggling with, what should I write about? Talk to your best friend, right?
Yeah.
Find someone that has known you, maybe it's your sibling, your friend, but again, a peer who's known you forever, and ask them, what's the most me thing, right? When you think of me, what comes to mind? If I asked my friends that, they would be like, you're obsessed with your animals, you're obsessed with Harry Potter, and I would probably, if I could go back in time and rewrite my college essay, I would probably write it about something, like that.
Yeah.
Something that I know, I was trying to look for maybe, do I have to tell a sob story to kind of make it seem like you have to take me, you feel so bad for me, or, maybe don't have this huge, sports victory to write about or something. But again, if you can, talk to your friends and figure out, what makes you think of me, that can help you really, narrow down those special aspects of your personality that an admissions reader will want to hear about.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pressure comes from people thinking they need some dramatic, life-changing, altering moment, and I think it's important to actually look at the about me, like you said, and write about Harry Potter instead. But
adding on to now the actual application process, how should students form a good activities list on the Common App? What are some good activities to add that you think would be beneficial to the application? And then also, additionally, I know students make a resume. So how does the resume and the activities list differ, and how would it boost your application if you submitted both?
Great question. So as far as activities, there's obviously not one size fits all kind of an answer. I always like to say a part-time job is very helpful. Colleges will see that you're reliable, you can take direction well, you work hard. So that's always great. But it really should be whatever you are interested in and passionate about. If you're going for a specific major, it should be things related to that major, right? So if you're going to major in business and you're sure about that, have some business-related activities, some internships, some job shadowing. And what you're going to want to do is when the admissions reader is reading through everything and they're looking through your activities list, you want them to get a sense of who you are and what you're passionate about. So you want it to tell a story. If it's kind of something over here, something over there, all over the place, that's okay, right? Some people like to try out different things, but if you know what you're interested in to kind of go along that path, it tells the story to the admissions reader. Also, as much as you can do what you want to do and give back in ways that you're passionate about, you're going to get so much more out of the experiences rather than doing it just for the college application.
And then in terms of, resume versus an activity list, certain schools will allow you to upload a resume and many won't. So first and foremost, always look at what a school is asking of you, and if there is not very clearly a spot within Common App for you to upload a resume, or within that school's, portal once you've applied to upload a resume, don't send them a resume because they don't want it. If they do give you that opportunity, then you really want to look at your resume and determine, is it vastly different from my activity sheet? Because you don't want to send something that's redundant, right? That just doesn't reflect positively on an applicant. That being said, your activity sheet only has 10 spaces and you're really limited. I think it's 150 characters for a description. So if you feel like your resume does a better job of expanding, upon the activities that you're listing, then it might make sense for you to also upload a resume. But if not, and they're really similar, I would say forego it.
Yeah.
Okay. And like for ordering them on the Common App, like how would you recommend a person should they do it by time spent or like actual enjoying like the importance to them? Like
I mean, I think in general, people will put the most impactful and what they've spent the most time on at the top and kind of go from there.
I think you also get a little bit of creativity with that, and you need to do as students and applicants what feels most authentic to you.
Yeah.
Again, as a former admissions reader, I literally have never once given thought to like, oh, why did this applicant order their activities in this way? So, try not to stress over that too much and go with an order that feels like authentic and makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And is it really important to show interest in colleges? I know it's different based on college, but if they track demonstrated interest, like going to high school visits, introducing yourself to the rep, and touring campus, like what are ways students could stand out for those schools that do track interest, and how does it like affect their application?
Absolutely. So you can always look, online on a school's website to determine whether or not they track demonstrated interest. Some universities are really forthcoming about whether they're tracking, others are not. So I tend to tell students, when you're thinking about engaging with a campus, try to take that demonstrated interest and whether or not it will help your application off of the table, and just go into that process knowing that the more research that you do into a school, the better you'll be able to articulate in your supplements, in your application, why you're a good fit for that school. Yep. So this way, if programs are tracking demonstrated interest, great, you're checking that box. If they're not, you're still in a really good position through all that research and engagement to be able to demonstrate and articulate why you're a good fit for that program. And in terms of going to visits, getting onto campuses, talking to admissions reps, those are all really important steps to take, because you're, hopefully spending the next 4 years of your life potentially living with these people, living on this campus. And what better way to know if that's going to be a good fit for you than to actually get there? The rep that comes to New Canaan is oftentimes the first person who's reading your application. So not that they're going to be able to remember every, 30, 40, 50 plus student that they meet at every single high school that they visit. But at the same time, that is an opportunity for you to just get some, FaceTime with the person who is going to be interacting with your application. And unless you make a terrible first impression, which none of our students do, that's only a good opportunity. It can't hurt you.
Yeah.
And I would just Google, does the school track demonstrated interest? Oftentimes a very large public university just can't because of the volume of applicants that are coming in. If you're curious about that, whether they track it. But again, to what Ms. Shadler said, going through the process in an authentic way and doing a deep dive, it could never hurt. So do it for all of the schools. And I will also say that some schools, if you're deferred from early action or early decision, some schools will look to see if at that point there's demonstrated interest on your part, right? So that can be a very important time to continue to show that interest in the school if you're waitlisted.
And I know that some students who get deferred and waitlisted, I know that they can also send additional letters of rec. And I know that they can submit a portfolio for some schools. So how would you deem that? What is the process for students who choose to do that?
So often they're in the portal. So once you hit apply, you'll get a link to a portal for that particular school. And around mid-year, you'll have an opportunity to add anything to your application that may have happened since the beginning of the year. It should be something that you don't have anywhere else. It should really be something brand new, and that really adds to your application.
And my biggest advice is just follow instructions.
Yes.
So if and when a student is deferred, you get, a letter just like you would with any decision type, and they will be very, very forthcoming with what they want, what they'll accept, and as long as you're staying within those parameters, then send everything and anything that you can.
Yeah.
If they are not asking for additional information and they don't clearly state, this is what it's okay to send us, then I would say don't add any additional information, because they're not asking for it. And it's important that you do follow instruction and, don't go outside of what a school is asking for.
Yeah. And then final question. So can you touch on some big deadlines for the seniors? I know today is a massive one. It's October 15th.
Yes.
I know some have already passed, but as a tool for juniors applying next fall as well, what would you say in terms of financial aid forms? What are those deadlines?
Sure.
FAFSA forms? Just any deadline in particular?
Sure. So, October 15th is a big one. About half my students have an October 15th school. November 1st is the second really big one. The other half, other than several students, are going to be applying November 1st. So as far as for future seniors over the summer, if they can work on that essay, if they can, it's their last summer to add to their activities list. If they're going to have a part-time job or if they're going to have another experience, it's a great time to do it, because the beginning of senior year is very stressful. You're focused on those first quarter grades that some of the schools may ask for. So you've got to keep your grades up and get all of this done, and juggle all those supplemental essays. So it's a lot. So I would say apply early if you can, and if you're so inclined to do so. But there is something to be said for waiting for the regular decision deadline to span it out for yourself. And again, that's January, February. And as far as financial aid, so the FAFSA, I believe it opens October 1st, and it's due by the end of June.
Yep.
And then there's also something called the CSS profile. So a lot of private institutions will ask for that instead of the FAFSA. It's a little bit more drawn out. You got to sit down with your parents, set aside a couple hours, and get that done. And that is usually based on that college and when that's due. It's usually late spring. And then for scholarships, many students will really dig into the scholarships late April, early May. They're usually not due until after May 1st, once many students have made their decision on where they're going.
Thank you so much for doing this podcast with us. I know it will help a lot of our seniors currently in the college process, or those who will soon be starting the college process. And also, this podcast was inspired by my story on the College and Career Center, so make sure to go check that out on the NCHS Courant website at nchscourant.com or our app. And to all the fellow seniors or parents watching this, I hope you had valuable information from this, and good luck on your college applications.
Thank you again.
Thanks for having us. This was fun.